Regardless of the sample set, women at the top never go beyond 10%.
Basic financial literacy, I don't think it's taught properly.
Men migrate for work, but women migrate for marriage.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dhan Ki Baat, an initiative by Times of India and StockGrow. I'm your host, Ankur Warikoo, and with me is the first panel, Pallavi, Chahal, and Nupur. Thank you for joining us today. As is obvious from the title, we're talking about women in finance, which I believe is a very important conversation to have, and we have a fantastic panel to have this discussion. So let me start with you, Pallavi. You are from finance. You've of course experienced what it is to be women in finance, growing up and of course experiencing it yourself. How have you seen a shift, if at all you have, in the Indian ecosystem when it comes to women both representing finance and working in finance?
Sure. So let me take you back to my entrepreneurial journey when I started ProcCap. So this was back in 2017-18. And at that point in time, the startup ecosystem was evolving. The VC community had just gotten around to the idea of investing in women-led or women co-led enterprises. And fintech industry was in its nascent stages. So the fact that we are a fintech came in much later after I started the company. So there was a very different timing, and so the challenges were paramount. When you look at the industry that we were in, financial services industry, largely male dominated. The customer segment that we were trying to address, because what we do is we finance the MSMEs in last mile regions of India, tier 2, tier 3 towns. So these were distributors, retailers, so largely male dominated industry. Close to 15% of our customers are women, and many of them are mostly on paper. So huge gap, women heavily underrepresented. And when we talk about that kind of an environment and ecosystem, so there were no parallels. So there was no role model. So we had women looking at in senior leadership positions in BFSI sector, but not any examples of women who were building financial services company. So you had to figure a lot out, especially when it came to raising funds and convincing the customers, the community where as a woman when you are going, they look at you very differently. I remember we were visiting markets and the customers would say, you need to have this cup of tea. So unless you sit down with those customers and have a tea, you can't build through. And we were doing that, visiting shops and markets in really remote regions in India. So a lot of learning, very exciting timing, but a lot of stereotypes and biases that did come in. A lot of questions from the investor community. But I think what really was helpful was that we were very convinced about what we were building, right? So there was no questions about, in our heads at least, about what we were doing. So the idea was that how do you break through all of this, cut the noise, and find out people who believe in you, and build a community around you of people who are ready to take that leap of faith. Forget the gender part, but for multiple other reasons, right? Because you're an early stage company. So take that leap of faith, try and, try your product out, give you that first break, the first investor who is willing to, cut the check. So we also experienced a lot of generosity. So I think, my biggest learning has been, it's a mixed bag. So what you focus on, right? So there was stereotypes, biases, we all talk about it, but we also have to see that the amount of goodwill that you get, because when you get out of that from your head and then you say, I am here to build something of value, and you just focus on creating that value, it will shine through, right? It's definitely harder, especially for women, it's no doubt. So you got to put that extra effort, extra work, and that's what I've learned. I came from a family which is middle class, born in Kanpur, UP. The odds are all stacked against you, and conservative family looking at UP. So it's a very different environment when we were growing up. Today, when I talk to my daughter, I don't think she looks at it in the same way. I'm reading a book with her talking about women and saying there were so many biases, there were issues when women did not used to get an equal opportunity. She's not ready to believe, because she's seeing her mother, her friends and family, their parents, and community around where women are leading from the front, they are taking charge. So I'm very optimistic. It's still abysmally low numbers. The last week there was a report that came out. It talks about only 1.6% CEOs in the Fortune India 500 companies. I think this number is around 7.5–8% in globally. So yes, there is a huge leaky pipeline, as we call it. But at the same time, I think the onus is on us, entrepreneurs, women in leadership to pave the way and take more women along and continue to put that extra effort if needed for our generation, so that the next generation has it slightly better. So that's been my learning.
And thanks for being that voice, because I'm so glad you echo that sentiment that your daughter is being raised in an environment and in a world where none of these conversations are
a part of the
like she's like, how was that, mom?
Exactly,
like, how did it feel to be that way? Chahal, you come from a very different side where you have been investing, as you mentioned, for nearly 4 to 5 years. You've been creating content now around finance for about a year or so. You've not had the opportunity to work, but you've been on your own ever since. And that means that you're somebody who took charge of personal finance as a woman from day one and built a career around it, not necessarily actively participated in the workforce around that. How was that journey? Like, was it any hard to get through? Was it something that came obvious? Did your environment support that or fight that?
I think I was more inclined towards learning more about money, or my main purpose was I just needed to know how to make more money. I just had to figure that part out. And I had a lot of support from my family. I feel that's the part which is the most important. Schools and families. In school, basic financial literacy, I don't think it's taught properly. Everybody knows that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but nobody knows what actually is money, and is it actually backed by gold? Because a lot of people have this misconception that it's backed by gold. So even the basics of finance and even the basics of investing is something which is not taught. Not to boys, not to girls, not to anybody. But when it comes to men in general, they're engraved with that thing that they have this in their subconscious that they are supposed to lead a different life. They have to be the bread earners and they have to know how to take care of themselves and the family. Women are not taught that. At least not a lot of women are taught that, right? So I definitely had a different upbringing in that sort because I wanted to learn all of that. I did not experience a lot of bias initially when it comes to handling finance, and I was encouraged by my father mainly to take care of my finances. And I've experienced this since I've started to create content. Not a lot of women, even in my audience, more than 70 to 80% are guys. I'm talking about the stock market. So more than 80% of people are guys and only 10–20% are women. Right? And I feel that number is mainly because I also talked to a lot of people, and there was a survey that only 1 out of 10 women actually handle their own finances. Yeah, and investment to ek alag hi topic hai. Nobody is interested in learning how to invest. They're mostly intimidated by the topic of finances and investments.
Number heavy, maths heavy, or
हाँ कि ये हमारी चीज़ नहीं है. Men should be handling this and all of that. There is that stereotype, and a lot of women, when we ask about what's stopping them, one reason which a lot of people give is the gender pay gap. That they don't get paid enough, and that is the reason they don't invest their money. But in reality, that thing is changing from what I've heard a lot of my friends and from my relatives, that gender pay gap is relatively improving now. So even the people who are getting paid enough, even they don't invest. I'm talking about women particularly. So the main reason is not just around money or not just around lack of knowledge, it is more about the willingness to know. Because when it comes to investing, I think you obviously know about it, the two things which you require are firstly the knowledge, and second, the confidence. And confidence you will only get when you are willing to take the knowledge first. True. And women mostly, I would say, take a back seat, and they're more intimidated by these terms, by investing in general, by handling finances. And that has to be changed 100%.
Absolutely.
That is something which I feel, even in content creation, you'll find very less women who are talking about stock markets. Very few women in general who are in the field. I go to a lot of events, wahan par bhi the ratio is extremely disproportionate. So those things I feel they have to be changed, and the main initiative has to start with women mainly, because you have to be willing to take the knowledge. Nobody knows how to invest, nobody knows how to take care of finances. It's more about how you take charge and you take the decision to take the first step, and then everything falls in place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chahal. So, Nupur, you come from a very interesting vantage point when it comes to me. You're a founder, you're a board member, you're an advisor. So you not just have a 10,000 feet level view of what's happening, but you're also clued in on the ground. I'm curious, how do you see these two worlds? Are they converging, or are they very different levels where there is a conversation happening around DI, say, but nothing's really happening on the ground? What's your perspective on this?
So thank you, Ankur. Very interesting question. And like you said, I do have a couple of different perspectives. As a founder, I have a platform which is bringing more women into private equity and venture capital as investors and as entrepreneurs. And I'm also talking to leaders and decision makers, so as to speak. The good news is that the conversation on DEI is really here. There is significant awareness both at the global level and at the India level. And that has really put it on the agenda of almost every credible organization, if I can say that. And what that has really prompted is tangible action, tangible initiatives. You know, people are making conscious efforts to hire more women. People are making conscious efforts to see how they can plug the leaky pipeline and have more women go up to the top. I think the challenge exists in the fact that the data hasn't changed in many years. The percentages are still the same in most industries. So, you know, for example, private equity, venture capital, the industry that I closely work with. You know, at the entry level, women, depending on your sample set, women would be anywhere between, say, 25 to 40%. But regardless of the sample set, women at the top never go beyond 10%. So there is a significant cost, I believe, to firms here because you're losing talent that you have invested in. You're losing talent that has really grown to understand your own thesis, your own culture, and there is a cost attached to it. Again, I think if we talk about what is changing, companies, when they're thinking about their initiatives, are starting to recognize this cost. They're struggling to figure out the solution. Because the solution is not very obvious. And for many people, there is quote-unquote cost attached to the solution. If you remember when India introduced the Maternity Benefits Act and said 6 months maternity leave and then another 6 months of flexi work if you know, the woman concerned chooses to. And there were so many, you know, so many people who went out and said on record that we will not hire women anymore because this is a cost to us. Right? So there has to be, I think there has to be a greater level of understanding of the pros and cons. I think there is enough research which says diverse teams make better decisions because you're really able to explore whatever question or whatever opportunity you have from various perspectives. You're sort of able to make a more robust decision with a very similar team, you know, non-diverse team, you probably risk becoming an echo chamber. There is also research which has brought out tangible business benefits, right? So there is a McKinsey research which says that you can get higher EBITDA. There is an IFC research which says that for private equity and venture capital firms, you can probably generate a higher than median IRR if you're more diverse in your team and if you're more diverse in your portfolio. So hopefully people will start to reach there. I think we are still a pretty long way off. And honestly, I think while this research helps, what I have seen really drive people is personal conviction. So there are a lot of people who come and say, a lot of men who come and say that we believe we need to do something because my daughter wants to be in private equity. And I know she will not succeed unless the industry changes, right? So a lot of it has to be driven by personal conviction, and ultimately that conviction has to translate into specific action, and which is what we are hoping to drive through WinPay.
Fantastic. No, thank you for your points. Absolutely. I want to ask a question to all three of you, and that is, at least in our culture, and I experience this, and I'm sure you will echo the sentiment, we grow up where the woman of the house is actually de facto the CFO, if you will. She's the one who's managing the money. She's the one who's doing a commendable job of the budgeting. Demonetization just exposed me to my mom's financial finesse like nothing. Like, "Ma, ye paisa kahan tha itne saal?" It was just hidden, it was parked. She knows exactly who to give what, when, everything, without any training, without any Excel sheets. And then somehow it gets lost, to the point that Chahal, you were mentioning that they know how to take care of their money, but they don't really actively invest. They are not certainly thinking of careers in finance or using this skill set. There is no little conversation around that. I just feel this is unfortunate talent wasted.
100%. I'll tell you one thing.
Yes,
If you
please.
search normally, you'll find a couple of articles, according to some research done, that women tend to be better investors and traders because
be
they're good
surprised.
at risk management. That women tend not to be overconfident, right? Because they're extremely, most of them they have less confidence. But that helps you in not taking a lot of risk, and which makes you more risk averse. And women tend to be better at investing and trading in general and handling the finances. It's just that they don't do it. If they start doing it, then they tend to be better, but they don't do it. So the initial problem is definitely the
No,
start.
and I love that, because this is helpful. What according to you, because now you're at the forefront of this in many ways, what really needs to change? Like, is it the government's job? Is it the private individual's job? Is it the family's job? If at all there is one job who needs to do it. But no, I'd love to have your opinion, Pallavi.
All of it. So, you know, the fact that as societies, right, we start to look at women as a significant contributor to the economy, and not only because, you know, there is a need to earn certain amount of income to run the family only, right? So there is a high cost of not plugging in the women into the economic and the workforce, right? And I think the good news is that everybody started to acknowledge and recognize that the industry is recognizing it. It's a question of, you know, how and when. And so, like, if I look at my example, the fact that my parents sent me to school and then to college is because of that I could do what I was able to. And so it starts from the family.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the workforce, right, and I always bring this out, right, it's not that we have to look at gender and inclusion in terms of the certain percentage of women in the teams or, you know, or the workforce. It goes much beyond that. So I think let me just take an example, right? So there are obvious and known reasons, right, that when it comes to child bearing or raising, or, you know, household chores, or, you know, unpaid labor in the form of taking care of the family, it will be the woman, and that is a very, you know, clear known factor. But then there are very subtle nuances to it, right? Like, you will find that women are, you know, I was speaking with somebody and they mentioned this interesting fact that if you look at it, men migrate for work, but women migrate for marriage.
Yeah.
And these are very subtle things which no one talks about. You know, it's always the onus of the woman to move to the either to the place where she's married, or, you know, wherever the husband is working. That's a given, most of the cases, you know. And that's happening at our level, right, in our societies. And we talk about the strata, which is absolutely not been so evolved and plugged in. It's a very different situation there. So then to find a job, and, you know, find the job which is actually as good, and women are no longer looking for a career and stable career. Nupur and I were speaking about this just before the panel. They are, you know, well qualified, they are driven, they are ambitious, and they want a meaningful and a purposeful career to be built. I think that's the change that we need to bring in, where, you know, how do we not only have that, you know, that cliff where, you know, you have equal opportunity at entry level, but slowly they keep dropping out. So the societies have to be built around that there are infrastructure available, there is enough support ecosystem available to be able to help women also rise and, you know, have equal meaningful work opportunity.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Great. Nupur, your point of view?
So, you know, I want to pick up on your example of your mom.
Sure.
And if I reflect back to my own childhood, and, you know, this is just in the course of WINPI, in the last 4 years, I've read a lot and I've spoken to so many people that I almost keep thinking about these things all the time. And if you think about it, in a typical household, if you have a boy and you have a girl, typical average household,
Sure.
the boy would be sent to the market. You'll give him money, you'll say, go buy this. the boy learns to do basic math, basic financial transaction at a very early age. The girl doesn't get to do that, right? If you're an entrepreneur family, if you have a business, the boy gets taken to the office, to the factory, to the godown, to the shop, whatever. There is early exposure to financial transactions. For the girl, the exposure is about, what has to be cooked, the house should look clean, etc., etc. More on the, it's another stereotype, but you sort of expect boys to take maybe commerce and science, and then you expect girls to take arts, humanities, right? A bit of that is breaking, right?
Sure.
So this year, I think about 44% of graduates at the Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants. So 44% of graduating chartered accountants were women.
Oh wow, I had no idea.
40 to 50% of B school graduates today are women, and 40 to 50% of STEM graduates today are women. So a lot of that is changed. A lot of the taboo is gone that women are not comfortable with maths, women are not comfortable with numbers, women are not comfortable with balance sheets and financial statements and finance per se. I think the next step is to create workplaces that welcome them and embrace them. I read this article this morning and I was kind of shocked because I had heard a similar statement when I started doing my CA. Somebody in the family said, "But अच्छी बात है, शादी के बाद भी अपना काम कर सकेगी," right? And there was this very fancy article in a leading business journal which said, women chartered accountants are leading the way being their own bosses, basically implying the same thing, that women are becoming chartered accountants because that allows them to quote unquote work at their own pace, which means work at their family's pace, right? So we haven't been able to link this talent to the workplace because the workplace hasn't been able to evolve. And one of my favorite things is to say that the workplace was created hundreds of years ago when there were only men in the workforce. So if there were women in the workforce at that time, parental leave would have been the norm. Equal work distribution, right? Lactation rooms would have been norm. I mean, all of this conversation about mat leave and working from home and flexi hours, it wouldn't exist. But the workplace hasn't been redesigned. The workforce has completely changed. So now what we really need is that we start evolving the workforce to say that there is this really strong pool of talent out there. And once we start to plug that gap, I think the signal that we are able to send out to society at large is so powerful. You completely remove that taboo that women and finance don't go hand in hand, that women and maths and numbers don't go hand in hand. And as soon as it becomes visible, so, today people talk about our finance minister being a woman. But really, a decade ago, we had so many banks having women as CEOs. You had Shikha Sharma, and you had Naina Lal Kidwai, and you had Chanda Kochar, and then you had Renuka and Vishaka. I mean, you had so many senior women in the banking ecosystem. And today, and again, thanks to this panel, I know that out of 142 listed BFSIs on the NSE 1000, only 7 have women CEOs. Wow. So we are not able to create role models, and we are not able to demonstrate tangibly that women and finance need not be mutually exclusive. It's not an oxymoron. And once we are able to plug that gap and make that journey forward, I think society at large will begin to think differently.
Perfect.
Just
Wonderful.
one point if I can add here, so we are into the business of providing credit, and every time there is a woman requiring that credit, there is always husband's documents required to do that, right? So, and if you look at the public sector bank providing credit, it's only 5% of that goes to women. So, I mean, you talk about everywhere, workplace, as consumers, I mean, there is a huge stigma, stereotype, and there's a long way to go before we can actually talk about an equal world that it should be.
We need to come to the end of this, so I would love to have this coming from the three of you. If you were measuring or tracking just one metric, an objective metric, any choice, to identify that the gender gap, women in finance, is reducing and is getting healthier, what would that metric be?
Metric in the sense?
Any number, whether it's percentage women in the workforce, whether it is percentage women opening up a DMAT account, anything that one can measure, what would that number be for each one of you?
I think even bank accounts is something which is very basic, but I just got to know that 1 out of 5 women don't even have a bank account.
Bank account.
Yeah, and that's a very weird thing because bank accounts are something which
Like, it's the start of
everybody thinks
everything.
that everybody's financially
Perfect,
inclusive.
right? So number of
Yeah.
bank accounts opened by women, I think that's a good metric. Nupur, would
For
you
me,
have it?
it's women in leadership.
Yeah.
Because I think that is a necessary cascading effect. You need
Totally.
role models. You need people who dilute the culture. You need people who sort of break through all the myths and the stereotypes.
Perfect.
And who really sort of pave the way for everybody else.
Love that. Great. Pallavi?
So for me, it's going to definitely be women in leadership and also the number of women who are entrepreneur as a percentage of men,
Perfect.
and getting access to similar sort of funding
Similar, yeah,
and
exactly,
credit.
and
I
equal
would like
playing
to add
ground.
one point. I feel that women, instead of feeling intimidated from the financial world and from investments, they should look at it as something which is liberating and not intimidating. Because in reality, a lot of women are stuck in toxic households and toxic even marriages, and they cannot get out only because of financial dependence. So that can be a amazing thing if that is something which
Totally,
the
totally.
mindset shift happens.
Wonderful, fantastic. On that note, thank you so much, all
Thank
three
you
of
so
you.
much.
It's been wonderful, and I'm so glad that you were able to share your thoughts transparently and openly. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.